What is happiness? Is it pleasure, comfort, or the absence of pain? For most of us, the word happiness immediately brings to mind images of success, love, laughter, and fulfillment, a life where everything finally goes right. We chase it through the things we can touch and measure: a higher salary, a perfect relationship, a more beautiful body, a comfortable home, or a sense of being admired and approved by others. Every advertisement promises it, every movie celebrates it, and every heart secretly longs for it. Yet, in the quiet moments when the noise fades, many of us still feel something missing, a faint emptiness that whispers that all the things we run after can never fill the space inside. People often say, "I'll be happy when I finish school, when I find love, when I make enough money, when I retire." But the moment that when arrives, it slips through our fingers like sand. The satisfaction is real but brief, and soon another desire takes its place. We live in an age that has more comfort than any generation before us, yet anxiety, loneliness, and restlessness have become almost universal. It seems that the more we chase happiness, the more it runs away. Over 2,500 years ago, a man named Siddhartha Gautama saw this same pattern unfolding in the world around him. Born into privilege, he had everything that most people think guarantees happiness: youth, beauty, wealth, and status. Yet when he looked deeply, he saw sickness, aging, and death all around, and realized that no pleasure, no possession could protect anyone from life's inevitable changes. That realization began his quest, not for a new pleasure, but for a deeper peace that could not be taken away by time or loss. After years of searching, he awakened to a truth that would later spread across the world. The kind of happiness we seek outside ourselves is fragile, but there is another kind, one that arises from understanding, wisdom, and freedom from craving. The Buddha's teaching on happiness is not about escaping life, nor about suppressing emotions, but about seeing life as it truly is. He did not offer magic promises or eternal rewards. Instead, he pointed to a direct way to end dissatisfaction at its root. True happiness, he said, does not come from satisfying every desire, but from understanding the nature of desire itself. It begins the moment we stop chasing and start observing, when we stop asking the world to make us happy and begin to understand how our own mind creates both joy and sorrow. So, what did the Buddha really teach about happiness? Is it about meditation alone, or about living simply, or about letting go of everything we love? The answer is more subtle and more liberating than most people imagine. The Buddha's message was never about running away from life, but about waking up within it. It was about seeing clearly the truth of change, of attachment, of suffering, and discovering that peace is not something to be achieved later, but something that is already possible here and now, in the heart that is awake. In this video, we will explore what the Buddha truly meant by happiness, a happiness not dependent on pleasure, success, or approval, but one that arises naturally when the mind is free from grasping. We will see how understanding suffering, rather than avoiding it, opens the door to genuine peace. We will look at how the Buddha's ancient wisdom can still speak directly to the struggles of our modern lives, and why real happiness, according to the Buddha, is not something we chase, but something we uncover when we stop running. Long before he was called the Buddha, he was simply a young man named Siddhartha Gautama, born into luxury and surrounded by everything that the world could offer. His father, a king, did everything in his power to shield him from discomfort. The prince lived in palaces built for each season, where the air was perfumed with flowers. The music of dancers filled the halls, and no trace of sickness, old age, or death was ever allowed near him. From the outside, his life seemed perfect. He had wealth, youth, strength, a loving wife, and a newborn son. Yet, even within this golden world, there grew a quiet unease, a whisper that all this beauty was fragile, that beneath every pleasure there was a shadow of loss waiting to appear. One day, Siddhartha left the palace and saw what his father had tried so hard to hide. On the streets, he saw a man bent with age, his body trembling and weak. Another day, he saw a man covered in disease, coughing and shaking. Later, He saw a corpse being carried to the cremation ground. These sights struck him deeply. He had never realized that aging, sickness, and death were not exceptions, but the common fate of all beings. Everything that is born must change and pass away. For the first time, he felt the weight of that truth. If all things end in decay, what kind of happiness can truly last? Haunted by these questions, he left the palace again and saw a fourth sight, a wandering ascetic, calm and radiant, who had renounced the world in search of spiritual peace. That vision planted a seed in his heart. Siddhartha realized that no amount of wealth or pleasure could protect him from life's impermanence. If suffering was inevitable, then perhaps the only true happiness must lie in understanding why suffering exists and how it can end. This thought grew until it became a burning resolve. One night, without anger or despair, he looked at his sleeping wife and child, and with great compassion he walked away from the palace, leaving behind comfort and power to seek the truth of liberation. For 6 years, he wandered the forests and plains of ancient India, studying under wise teachers and practicing severe austerities. He learned deep meditation, disciplines of breath, and philosophies of the soul. Yet, though his concentration grew sharp and his mind became still, he felt that something essential was still missing. He starved himself until his body was nothing but skin and bones, believing that by conquering pain he could conquer attachment. But the more he punished the body, the weaker his mind became. One day, collapsing by the riverbank, he realized that neither indulgence nor self-torture could lead to the freedom he was seeking. In that moment of exhaustion, a simple truth dawned upon him, that happiness is not found in extremes, but in balance, in the middle way between craving and denial. He accepted food offered by a young woman, regaining his strength. His companions, still lost in ascetic ideals, abandoned him, thinking he had failed. Yet, alone beneath a great fig tree in Bodh Gaya, Siddhartha sat down and made a silent vow. Let my body wither away if it must, but I will not rise from this seat until I have found the end of suffering. With a mind steady as a mountain, he turned his awareness inward and began to see clearly the workings of birth and death, desire and dissatisfaction, craving and release. Through the long night, he watched the patterns of the mind unfold, how ignorance leads to craving, craving to clinging, clinging to becoming, and thus to suffering again and again. As dawn approached, understanding broke open like light flooding the world. Siddhartha realized that all phenomena arise and pass away due to causes and conditions, and that freedom comes not from controlling life, but from understanding its impermanent nature. He saw that when craving ceases, peace naturally arises, not the peace of escape, but the peace of awakening, the peace of seeing clearly. At that moment, he became the Buddha, the awakened one. The happiness he discovered was unlike any the world could offer. It was not the thrill of possession or the comfort of pleasure, but a stillness unshaken by gain or loss, praise or blame, birth or death. The Buddha saw that suffering begins not because life is cruel, but because the mind clings to what is changing, expecting permanence where there is none. True happiness, then, is not found by running from pain or grasping after pleasure, but by understanding the nature of both. From that awakening, the Buddha began to teach that happiness is not something to be manufactured, but something to be uncovered when delusion falls away. The world calls it enlightenment, but it is also the most natural state of being, a mind that knows things as they are and no longer fights against the truth. The Buddha's search for happiness ended not in the discovery of a new pleasure, but in the realization that real peace was already there, waiting behind the noise of craving. He found that the key to happiness is not the endless pursuit of satisfaction, but the gentle art of letting go. When the Buddha first began to teach after his enlightenment, he did not start by speaking about heaven, miracles, or divine rewards. He began instead with something far more direct, something that every human being could recognize in their own heart: suffering, or as he called it, dukkha. Many people misunderstand this word. They think it means that the Buddha's message is pessimistic, that he only saw life as pain and sorrow. But dukkha is not a cry of despair. It is an honest diagnosis of the human condition. The Buddha was not trying to make us hopeless. He was trying to help us see clearly what we spend our whole lives avoiding. He understood that only by truly seeing suffering can one discover the end of it. Just as a doctor must first understand the illness before prescribing the cure, so too must we understand dukkha before we can know real happiness. What is dukkha? It is the unsatisfactoriness that runs through everything we experience. Even moments of joy carry within them the seed of their own disappearance. The pleasure of youth fades into the anxiety of aging. The sweetness of success turns into fear of failure. The warmth of love hides the potential for loss. Nothing we can hold stays the same. And because we do not see this clearly, we cling to things as if they could last forever. The Buddha observed that this clinging, this constant craving for what is pleasant and the resistance toward what is unpleasant, is what gives birth to suffering. We want the world to obey our desires, but the world follows its own law of change. Think of how easily happiness turns into worry. A person wins a great prize and feels delighted, but soon begins to fear losing it. Someone falls in love and feels joy, but hidden beneath that joy is the silent tension of attachment, the fear that this person may leave, change, or die. Even in moments of pleasure, the mind secretly tightens, afraid that the feeling will end. That tightening is dukkha. It is not that pleasure is bad, but that we depend on it for stability, hoping it can protect us from the impermanence of life. The Buddha compared it to drinking salt water. The more you drink, the thirstier you become. The Buddha called the cause of suffering tanha, or craving. Craving takes many forms. Craving for sensual pleasure, for existence, for non-existence, for approval, for control. It is a fire that never goes out, because every time we satisfy one desire, another arises in its place. The mind keeps whispering, just one more, and we obey it endlessly, believing that the next thing will finally make us whole. Yet no matter how much we consume, how much we achieve, there is always another longing waiting to appear. The Buddha saw this cycle with great compassion, not as sin or failure, but as ignorance, the mind's blindness to the way things truly are. We suffer, he said, because we do not see clearly the impermanent, selfless, and interdependent nature of all things. We cling to what changes and call it mine. We build identities around temporary experiences and call them me. We mistake the flickering play of sensations, thoughts, and emotions for something solid and lasting. When these illusions collapse, when the relationship ends, the job disappears, the body weakens, we feel broken, not because the world betrayed us, but because we misunderstood it. The world was never meant to stay still. To understand dukkha is not to become sad or cynical. It is to awaken from the dream that life can ever be made perfect through control or possession. It is to recognize that joy and sorrow, pleasure and pain, gain and loss, all are woven from the same fabric of impermanence. When we truly see this, something softens inside us. We begin to stop demanding that reality fit our desires. We stop fighting change and start flowing with it. This understanding opens the first door to genuine happiness, because happiness that depends on control will always be fragile, but happiness that arises from wisdom is unshakable. The Buddha's insight into dukkha is not a philosophy to be believed, but a truth to be observed in our own experience. Every time we want something and do not get it, or fear losing something we have, or resist an unpleasant feeling, we can see dukkha operating. And every time we relax that grasp, even a little, we taste a small freedom, the space between wanting and having, between holding and letting go. That space is where peace begins. The Buddha did not ask us to reject pleasure or seek pain. He asked us to understand both without clinging. When we stop blaming the world for our suffering and instead look into how craving shapes our minds, a quiet wisdom begins to grow. We see that life's instability is not the enemy, it is the teacher. Change itself is what allows renewal, growth, and awakening. If things were permanent, nothing could ever improve. Understanding dukkha, therefore, becomes the foundation for compassion, for ourselves, and for others. We realize that everyone, everywhere, is struggling under the same delusion, chasing happiness in things that cannot last. And in seeing this, the heart softens. It no longer judges, but understands. The Buddha's first noble truth, that life contains dukkha is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of freedom. When we see suffering clearly, we begin to understand its cause. When we understand its cause, we begin to glimpse its end. And when we see that the end of suffering is possible, we realize that true happiness is not a distant ideal, but a living potential within each moment of awareness. To face dukkha with wisdom is to walk the first step on the path to peace, the path that leads from confusion to clarity, from craving to contentment, from restless seeking to the quiet joy of simply being. When the Buddha spoke about the end of suffering, he called it Nibbāna, the cessation, the cooling of the fire, the peace that comes when craving no longer binds the mind. This was the third noble truth, and it reveals a kind of happiness that is beyond what most people imagine possible. It is not the happiness of excitement or comfort, not the fleeting joy of getting what we want, but a happiness born from understanding, from the quiet freedom that arises when the heart stops clinging to the changing world. To those still caught in the storms of desire, this may sound distant or even empty. Yet to those who have tasted even a moment of real stillness, when the mind no longer reaches or resists, it is the most complete fulfillment one can know. The Buddha taught that happiness based on conditions will always be unstable because the conditions themselves are unstable. When something depends on gain, status, praise, or affection, it will rise and fall as those things come and go. This kind of happiness is like a candle flickering in the wind, bright for a moment, then gone. But there is another kind of light, one that does not depend on fuel, that shines from within the very nature of awareness itself. It is the peace of knowing that nothing needs to be added, nothing needs to be taken away. The mind no longer measures life in terms of success or failure, pleasure or pain. It simply rests in clarity, in balance, in equanimity. This is the difference between worldly happiness and the happiness the Buddha spoke of. Worldly happiness relies on having what we like, being with those we love, controlling how things unfold. It is built upon the fragile assumption that we can hold the world still. But the happiness of awakening relies on understanding. It comes not from what we get, but from what we release. It is a happiness that grows as clinging dissolves, as ignorance fades, as wisdom begins to see that every moment, no matter how it appears, is part of a vast flow that cannot be owned. Imagine holding a beautiful flower. At first, the joy of its fragrance fills you, but soon you fear that it will wither. You may try to keep it fresh, to hold it tightly, but your very grip bruises its petals. The Buddha's wisdom shows another way, to enjoy the beauty of the flower without needing it to stay, to love without ownership, to feel joy without fear of loss, to live fully without demanding permanence. This is the taste of true happiness. It is not a cold detachment, but a warm, gentle clarity that allows everything to be as it is. The Buddha described this state as santi, peace, a coolness of heart that comes when the fires of craving, aversion, and delusion have gone out. It is not the peace of isolation or withdrawal, but the peace of understanding. One sees the world still turning, people still laughing and crying, the wind still moving through the trees, and yet within, there is no struggle, no inner noise. The mind is like a still lake reflecting the moon. Things come and go, but the water remains undisturbed. This is the happiness that is not born and does not die, because it does not depend on what happens. It is freedom from the need for things to be different. Many people fear that letting go will make life dull or empty, as if happiness only exists in excitement or achievement. But the Buddha discovered that the opposite is true. When grasping falls away, life becomes more vivid, more intimate, more precious. Without craving, we are able to see things clearly for the first time. The play of light on a leaf, the sound of rain, the rise and fall of the breath. These simple things, once overlooked, become sources of quiet, joy because we are no longer demanding that they last. In the stillness of a mind that does not cling, even ordinary moments shimmer with peace. The happiness of release is not emotional pleasure. It is wisdom's serenity. The Buddha compared it to the cool shade after escaping a burning desert. One who has lived his whole life chasing desires is like a traveler walking under the scorching sun, desperate for water. When he finally finds shelter, The coolness feels divine, not because the air itself has changed, but because the struggle has ceased. In the same way, when the fires of craving and ignorance are extinguished, the happiness that remains is simple, natural, and effortless. It was always there, hidden beneath the smoke of desire. This true happiness cannot be given or taken away by others. It does not depend on recognition, comfort, or even good fortune. It is not something we manufacture through willpower. It blossoms when understanding matures. As the Buddha said, peace comes from within. Do not seek it without. The happiness that comes from within is steady because it is rooted in wisdom, not in circumstances. Even when the body ages, even when life changes, that inner calm remains unshaken, like the deep ocean untouched by the waves above. To understand this happiness is to realize that liberation is not somewhere far away, nor is it reserved for saints and monks. It is present in this very moment, in the quiet awareness that sees thoughts and feelings rise and fall without identification. Each time we release a grasping thought, each time we stop resisting what is, we taste a drop of that freedom. The Buddha's happiness is not found by escaping the world, but by no longer being imprisoned by it. It is the joy of a mind that sees clearly, that nothing needs to be possessed, nothing needs to be feared, and nothing needs to be permanent for peace to exist. The world still moves, pain still comes and goes. But the awakened one smiles, not because everything is perfect, but because he no longer demands that it be. This is the nature of true happiness, a joy beyond gain and loss, beyond time and change, beyond all conditions. It is the gentle radiance of a heart that has finally stopped running, a heart that rests naturally in the peace of knowing nothing is missing. To understand the path is one thing, but to live it is another. The Buddha's teaching was never meant to remain in books, temples, or sermons. It was meant to be practiced, breathed, and lived moment by moment. The path to liberation, often summarized as the Noble Eightfold Path, is not a ladder to climb or a ritual to complete. It is a way of life, a deep transformation of how we see, think, speak, and act. Every step on this path is both the journey and the destination, because awakening is not something that happens someday in the future. It unfolds here and now, in how we relate to each experience. The first step, right view, is the seed of wisdom. It begins with seeing the truth that everything in life is impermanent, unsatisfactory when clung to, and not self. This understanding is not merely intellectual, it must penetrate the heart. When we truly see that holding on to what changes leads to suffering, the mind naturally begins to release. Right view is the compass that keeps us aligned with reality, reminding us that no amount of external gain can bring lasting peace, and that liberation lies in seeing things as they truly are. It is this clear vision that transforms blind desire into mindful awareness and confusion into wisdom. From this understanding arises right intention, the commitment to live with kindness, renunciation, and harmlessness. It is the quiet vow to stop feeding greed, hatred, and delusion. The Buddha taught that intention is the heart's direction. It determines the quality of our karma. When our intention is pure, our actions follow. Naturally, we begin to live not for selfish pleasure or recognition, but for peace, our own and that of others. To intend well is to plant the seeds of liberation in every thought and action, allowing wisdom to guide us instead of craving. Then comes right speech, the art of using words as tools for peace rather than weapons for harm. The Buddha said that speech should be true, kind, and timely, not designed to flatter, divide, or deceive. Every word we speak carries energy that can either build understanding or strengthen delusion. When we practice mindful speech, silence becomes more meaningful and words become acts of compassion. In a world full of noise, gossip, and reaction, speaking truthfully and gently is already a form of liberation. Right action extends this mindfulness into how we live in the world. It means refraining from harm, not killing, not stealing, not engaging in sexual misconduct, but beyond restraint. It also means cultivating generosity, respect, and integrity. When our conduct is clean, the mind feels light, unburdened by guilt or regret. The Buddha likened moral discipline to fertile soil. Without it, wisdom cannot take root. Each act of kindness, each moment of honesty, is a step toward freedom because it weakens the self-centered habits that bind us to suffering. Right livelihood continues this principle in how we earn our living. The Buddha advised avoiding trades that harm beings or corrupt the mind, such as dealing in weapons, living creatures, intoxicants, or deceit. The deeper meaning of right livelihood is living in harmony with conscience, knowing that the way we sustain ourselves should not contradict our values. It is not only about profession, but about the inner attitude, working not from greed or competition, but from a sense of service and balance. A peaceful mind cannot grow from a livelihood rooted in harm. Right effort is the energy that sustains the path. The Buddha described four right efforts: to prevent unwholesome states from arising, to abandon those that have arisen, to cultivate wholesome states, and to maintain those that already exist. This effort is not about struggle or force, but about mindful diligence, like tending a fire with care, neither letting it die nor letting it burn out of control. We learn to channel our energy toward awakening, instead of scattering it on distractions. Right effort is the discipline that transforms intention into reality. Right mindfulness is the heart of the path, the continuous awareness that observes the body, feelings, mind, and mental phenomena without clinging or aversion. Through mindfulness, we see directly how craving arises and passes, how every experience is impermanent. This seeing is not cold observation, but an intimate knowing that leads to freedom. When the mind becomes aware of its own movements, delusion loses its power. The Buddha compared mindfulness to a guardian at the gate, watching what enters and leaves the mind. With mindfulness, we no longer live as prisoners of habit. We live awake, aware, and free in each moment. Right concentration completes the path by gathering the mind into stillness. It is the deep unification of awareness known as jhana, states of profound calm where the mind becomes clear, steady, and luminous. In such stillness, the grasping self temporarily disappears, revealing the natural purity of consciousness. Concentration is not an escape from life, but a training of the mind to see clearly without distraction. From this deep stillness arises insight, vipassana, the direct realization that all phenomena are impermanent, not self, and unsatisfactory. When insight matures, liberation unfolds. The heart releases its last attachments and rests in unshakable peace. Yet, the Buddha always emphasized that the path is not a rigid sequence, but a living practice. Each factor supports the others, and together they form a circle of awakening. Right view guides right intention. Ethical conduct purifies the mind. Mindfulness and concentration give rise to wisdom, which deepens right view again. It is a path of balance, neither indulgence nor suppression, neither blind faith nor dry intellect. The middle way leads between extremes, allowing the mind to mature naturally through awareness and understanding. To live the teachings means to bring this path into the ordinary moments of life. Every breath is an opportunity to practice mindfulness. Every challenge is a mirror for patience and compassion. Every encounter with another person is a chance to cultivate understanding. Liberation is not found in distant temples or future lifetimes. It is here, in the way we respond to this moment. The Buddha's path is not about escaping the world, but awakening within it, learning to walk through life with wisdom instead of ignorance, with compassion instead of fear. The path to liberation is not easy, but it is profoundly simple. It asks for sincerity more than perfection, presence more than performance. Step by step, as the mind becomes clearer, the chains of craving loosen. One day, without effort, the traveler realizes there is no more path to follow, because the destination was never somewhere else. The journey itself was the awakening. The Buddha's teaching was never about becoming something new, but about remembering what we already are when delusion falls away, peaceful, aware, and free. Liberation, in the Buddha's language, is called vimutti, freedom, release, the unbinding of the heart. It is not a promise for a distant heaven or a reward after death. It is a living realization, available here and now, when the mind truly understands its own nature. The Buddha never spoke of liberation as something to be attained in the future, as if it were a treasure hidden somewhere far away. He spoke of it as something revealed when the coverings of ignorance fall away, like the sun that has always been shining behind the clouds. The end of the path is not the gaining of something new, but the complete letting go of all that binds us. It is the silence that remains when the noise of craving stops. To most people, freedom means the ability to do what we want. But in the Buddha's understanding, that kind of freedom is still bound by desire, because it depends on getting one's way. True freedom is much deeper. It is the freedom from wanting, from being driven by the endless winds of craving and fear. It is the freedom from the compulsion to become, to achieve, to prove, to hold, to run. When these movements quiet down, what remains is not emptiness in the ordinary sense, but a luminous stillness, a peace that is whole and sufficient. This is the essence of Nibbāna, not a place or a state to enter, but the extinguishing of the fires that once consumed the heart. When craving ceases, suffering ceases. This was the Buddha's simple formula, repeated again and again, yet its simplicity hides a depth beyond measure. The whole world moves on the current of desire, the wish to have, to be, to become. The Buddha's awakening was the discovery that this current can be stopped, not by suppressing it, but by seeing through it. When one sees that every desire is born from ignorance of impermanence and not self, desire loses its power. The mind no longer chases what is fleeting, no longer fears what is changing. It rests in knowing that all things arise and pass naturally, and that nothing truly belongs to anyone. This realization transforms how we see life and death. To the awakened mind, birth and death are not beginnings or endings, but moments in a vast flow of causes and conditions. Just as waves rise and fall on the ocean without disturbing its depth, so experiences arise and cease in the space of awareness. The Buddha described the liberated one as freed from birth as the sky is freed from clouds. There is still the body, the senses, the world, but the mind no longer clings to them as I or mine. The heavy burden of identity drops away, leaving only a natural, effortless being. Such liberation cannot be described fully in words because it is beyond concepts of self and time. The Buddha often used metaphors to hint at it: the extinguishing of a flame, the cooling of a fire, the crossing of a flood. These are not symbols of annihilation, but of peace. The flame is not destroyed. It simply goes out because the fuel is exhausted. In the same way, when the fuel of craving and ignorance is gone, the burning restlessness of existence ends. What remains is not nothingness, but profound freedom, the cool, vast silence of a heart that no longer burns. For those who hear this teaching, liberation might seem remote, perhaps too high for ordinary life. But the Buddha always emphasized that the path and the goal are not separate. Each moment of awareness, each act of letting go, is already a taste of liberation. When anger arises and we see it clearly without feeding it, that is freedom. When desire appears and we understand it instead of obeying it, that is freedom. When we can meet pain without resistance and joy without attachment, we are already living the Buddha's path. Liberation is not something waiting at the end. It grows silently in every moment of mindfulness and wisdom. Even after the Buddha attained enlightenment, he continued to live among people, to walk, to eat, to teach. His freedom was not an escape from the world, but a complete peace within it. He experienced the same sun and rain, the same hunger and fatigue, but his mind remained unshaken. This is the beauty of liberation. It does not remove us from life. It transforms how we experience it. The liberated person still feels, still acts, still loves, but without attachment or fear. There is compassion without sorrow, wisdom without pride, peace without withdrawal. It is the fullness of life lived without the shadow of self. In the suttas, the Buddha described the liberated mind as untraceable, like the flight of a bird in the open sky. It moves through the world but leaves no mark, no trail of ego, no clinging to identity or past. This image captures the essence of freedom, to live fully, yet without being bound. The mind is open, like the sky itself, vast, clear, untouched by the passing clouds of thought and emotion. This openness is not indifference. It is love purified of possession. It is not numbness. It is joy freed from craving. To approach this liberation, we do not need to become monks or withdraw from society. We need only begin to see, to look deeply into our own experience with honesty and stillness. Every breath, every feeling, every thought can teach impermanence. Every moment of awareness weakens ignorance. Slowly, the walls of I and mine begin to crumble, and a new way of seeing dawns, a seeing that is not owned by anyone, that simply is. When the self dissolves, what remains is boundless compassion, effortless wisdom, and unshakable peace. This is what the Buddha offered to the world, not a philosophy, not a belief system, but a direct way to end suffering. It is the invitation to awaken from the dream of self, to step beyond the cycle of grasping and fear, to discover the timeless peace that has always been here. Liberation is not the privilege of saints. It is the birthright of every conscious being. The door is open, the path is clear, and the destination is closer than breath. As the Buddha said, within this very fathom-long body, with its perception and mind, lies the world, the origin of the world, the cessation of the world, and the path leading to its cessation. So, the journey ends. Where it began, here, in this moment. The seeker disappears, and only awareness remains, silent and radiant. The waves of becoming subside into stillness, and the heart knows. This is Nibbāna. The peace beyond all words, the freedom beyond all fear. Nothing gained, nothing lost. Just the quiet knowing that all has always been as it is, free, empty, complete. After all the teachings, the meditation, the reflection, and the silence, the final question remains. How do we live this truth? The Buddha never wanted people to worship him as a god or to turn his words into a doctrine, frozen in time. He wanted the Dhamma to be lived, breathed through daily life, seen in the way we treat others, and felt in the way we meet each moment. The Living Dhamma is not confined to monasteries or meditation halls. It is everywhere, in every gesture, every breath, every encounter. To live with awareness, kindness, and wisdom is to make each step an expression of awakening. When the Buddha spoke about the Dhamma, he called it ekaliko, timeless, immediate, always relevant. This means that awakening is not a distant goal to chase, but a truth that can be realized here. And now, in the middle of ordinary life. Washing dishes, walking to work, caring for family, facing conflict, all of these moments hold the same opportunity to awaken if the mind is clear. What makes a moment spiritual is not its form, but our awareness within it. A monk in meditation and a mother comforting her child can both live the Dhamma if their hearts are present and free from clinging. Living the Dhamma begins with mindfulness, the simple, direct awareness of what is happening as it happens. When we are mindful, even the most ordinary acts become sacred. Eating becomes a meditation on gratitude. Walking becomes a lesson in impermanence. Breathing becomes a doorway to stillness. Mindfulness is not about slowing down or retreating from the world, but about being fully awake to it. We see how thoughts and emotions arise and pass, how craving sneaks into our decisions, how the sense of I tries to claim every experience. Each moment of recognition weakens the illusion of self and deepens wisdom. Yet mindfulness alone is not enough. The Buddha's path is a harmony of wisdom and compassion, understanding life as it is, and responding with a kind heart. When we see that others suffer for the same reasons we do, because of craving, fear, and delusion, compassion naturally arises. We begin to speak gently, to forgive more easily, to act with care. True compassion is not sentimental. It does not come from pity or superiority. It comes from understanding that we are all caught in the same human condition. The Buddha's compassion was vast because it was rooted in wisdom. He saw clearly that harming another is never separate from harming oneself. To live the Dhamma is to turn wisdom into action. It means practicing generosity not as a duty, but as a natural expression of freedom. When the heart is no longer obsessed with gain and loss, giving becomes joyful. The Buddha said that the fragrance of virtue travels far. A kind deed leaves a peace that spreads beyond what we can see. Every small act, a smile, a word of patience, a moment of forgiveness, is a ripple of awakening, moving through the world. The Dhamma is not something we preach. It is something we radiate through the quiet example of how we live. Even when difficulties arise, and they always will, the Dhamma provides a way to meet them. The awakened mind does not run from pain, nor does it cling to pleasure. It meets everything with balance. When challenges appear, they are seen as teachers. When loss comes, it becomes a reminder of impermanence. When joy arises, it is received with gratitude but without attachment. This steady, calm attitude is not indifference but deep wisdom. The Buddha compared such a mind to a lotus flower that grows in muddy water yet remains unstained. To live the Dhamma is to stand in the world's storms without losing inner peace. In the modern world, where noise and distraction surround us, it may seem harder than ever to walk this path. Yet the Dhamma was made precisely for this, to bring clarity amidst confusion. We don't need to escape to the mountains to find peace. We need to awaken in the middle of our busy lives. The Buddha's teachings are not outdated. They are medicine for the human condition, which has not changed. Greed, hatred, and delusion still drive the world. Mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom are still the cure. Whether we are in ancient India or modern society, the human heart still seeks the same freedom. To live the Dhamma in today's world means to bring awareness into our relationships, our work, and even our use of technology. It means pausing before we speak online, reflecting before we judge, listening before we react. It means consuming not only food, but information and emotions with mindfulness. Every choice becomes a part of the practice. What we support, how we earn, how we treat the earth, how we respond to suffering. The Dhamma invites us to live responsibly, gently, and with wisdom, not as saints apart from the world, but as human beings fully awake within it. In this way, the boundary between meditation and life disappears. Sitting in silence is not separate from speaking with kindness. Watching the breath is not different from watching the heart. The Buddha's awakening did not end with his enlightenment. It continued in the way he lived, walking, teaching, listening, and resting in compassion. The same is true for us. Awakening is not a single event. It is a continuous unfolding, renewed in each moment we choose awareness over habit, peace over reactivity, wisdom over ignorance. As the Buddha said, he who walks in the Dhamma sleeps peacefully, wakes peacefully, and walks peacefully through the day. The living Dhamma is not about escaping the world, but transforming how we experience it. It is the art of being fully human, seeing clearly, feeling deeply, and acting wisely. When mindfulness and compassion blend in daily life, even simple things shine with quiet beauty. A cup of tea, a kind word, a moment of silence. These become gateways to awakening. And so, the journey circles back to its source. The search for truth, the practice of mindfulness, the discipline of morality, the insight into impermanence, all of it leads here, to this ordinary, miraculous moment. The Dhamma is not somewhere else. It is alive wherever awareness meets the present. To live it is to realize that enlightenment is not the end of life's story but the way we walk through it, with eyes open, heart open, and mind free. The living Dhamma breathes through every being who sees the world as it is, without distortion. It is the quiet smile on the face of change, the compassion that embraces pain without resistance, the wisdom that knows everything arises only to pass away. When we live this way, the world itself becomes our temple, every breath our meditation, and every step our prayer. This is how the Buddha's teaching continues, not in words carved on stone, but in hearts that live awake.